Good afternoon. It's great to be here. Thank you, Mayor Scuro, for having us back. Last year was a resounding success, and we're glad to be back here with everyone. I am Michele Foss. I'm a regional water planner with the Texas Water Development Board, and I have the privilege of overseeing and help coordinating the work that's being done for regional water supply planning for both Region L, which is the South Central Texas region, that's the upper Nueces Basin, and Region N, which is the coastal basin. And behind me, we have Kristi Shaw with HDR, and she is the lead planning consultant for Region N here in the Coastal Bend. And we have Lauren Gonzalez, who is the planning lead for Region L. I'm going to kick us off real briefly. I know it's right after lunch, assuming you didn't have a dicey drive on your way down here. I'm going to give a quick little primer on regional water planning in Texas. As Travis mentioned, water supply is a very, very critical topic, critical need, especially in the areas in Texas where we are often water short, and we're also growing in a good way. So what we're attempting to do, and in many cases succeeding, the further along we go in the process, is trying to secure a water secure future for our municipalities, for our industries, for other resource needs such as recreation, the environment, so that we can all be successful Texans. The regional water planning in Texas actually goes way back. Texas had some extreme droughts in the 1951 to 1955 timeframe, and there was talk and some white papering about what we can do to possibly strengthen the water supplies that we had. There were some reservoirs that were planned. There were other talks about things that could be done, and other than 3 or 4 reservoirs being constructed from the 50s to the late 70s, not a whole lot was done about it. And that all changed with Senate Bill 1 in 1997, where the legislature directed the Water Development Board to create a bottom-up process for regional water supply planning. So the Water Development Board segregated the state into 16 individual planning regions. Almost all of them are divided either by watersheds and or political boundaries or a combination thereof. So we have 16 regions that are tasked with developing region-specific water supply plans every 5 years. So you can't say, well, things change. Population changes, industrial makeup of an area changes, agricultural makeup of an area changes. So you can't just create a water supply plan and park it on a shelf and leave it there. It needs to be a living, growing document, just as we all are living, growing, changing. So we look at a variety of factors in developing these plans. Group membership. Each regional water planning group it varies in size based on the number of counties that are included and the interests that are represented as part of the regional water planning group. Everybody that is a member of the regional water planning group is a volunteer. They are not paid for their time. And these folks that make up the group are an extremely diverse background. We have people from municipalities, whether they're water utilities, whether they're cities, whether they are utility districts, community improvement districts, river authorities, groundwater districts, industrial representatives, counties. Almost every regional water planning group has one county judge that serves on it to represent the county. Agriculture and environment. And there's at least one member of the general public that serves on each regional water planning group. And as Travis mentioned, we have a local political sponsor that serves as the administrative oversight for the group. Nueces River Authority oversees Region N, and they are a voting member on Region L. And they are assisted by teams of great consultants like Lauren and Kristi back here. So for the regional water planning process, it is a lengthy process. They pretty much use up the entire 5 years or so allotted for developing the plans. And it all starts with describing the region. Each region, although they share some similarities, every region is a little different. That's a function of the makeup of the communities that comprise the region, the industries, the agriculture, the other makeups of that region that makes each one unique. From that, we take a look at the population and how the population is changing. It used to be the first 4 planning cycles, actually first 5 planning cycles. The Water Development Board tried to make it easy and just assumed that the population was going to grow for everyone. And if that was not the case, then it just kind of leveled off at a certain point. This planning cycle was the first planning cycle where information was taken from the state demographer's office, and we showed not only counties and municipalities where population was increasing, showing need for water supply, but we also showed where population was decreasing, which also caused a lot of panic because no one wants to be faced with how can our community grow if the population is decreasing. We also took a look at the water demands for each region and how that's changing. As you might expect, the better the conservation measures that have been implemented over the regional water planning cycles, sometimes your water demands go down overall per person, but as your population's growing, your needs are still going up. So we take a look at municipal needs, we take a look at industrial needs, we take a look at livestock needs, we take a look at irrigated agricultural needs, we take a look at environmental needs, and we figure out what supplies we have, and then we figure out where the shortages are. And then the planning groups evaluate and recommend water management strategies and water management supply projects to address those shortages. And that's kind of where we are in the planning process right now. I'm about to turn it over to Kristi, who will talk a little bit about where we go from that point in the process. And she will talk a little bit about Region N and what's being done. And then Lauren will talk a little bit about Region L.
Thanks, Michele. So we've been working the last year and a half or so to prove up and true up the Water Development Board projections on population and water demands. Those were adopted. We are evaluating the current supplies within that context and identifying the needs. Now the real current effort is focused on the evaluation of water management strategies to meet the projected needs going out to 2080. So the Texas Water Development Board leans on the administrative code as far as provisions that need to be included in the regional water plans. So each planning group takes a look at a whole suite of categories with respect to water supplies, and they're listed here. When we're crafting the best options and evaluating those strategies for each region. So I have had the pleasure of working with the Coastal Bend Region N now for 20 years. Started working with them when I was 11 years old. And it's made up with a great bunch of folks that dedicate tirelessly their time and energy into planning for the future water needs in this area and protecting water supplies and solidifying water security and resiliency. I've actually had the pleasure of working with some of the same folks over the last 20 years, which just is a testament of their deep commitment to the area. The chair has been involved in Region N since the inception of regional planning back in '99. So the Coastal Bend region consists of 11 counties. There's 41 municipal water groups. 11 county other, and those that get kind of lumped into the county other are your smaller utilities, and those are considered within each county when we're looking at addressing their water needs. There are 4 major wholesale water providers in the area, and that's the City of Corpus Christi, San Patricio Municipal Water District, South Texas Water Authority, and Nueces County WCID number 3, Robstown. So as part of this development of the plan, we're looking at projected needs out to 2080. I will say that about 80% or so of the region comes from surface water supplies that are provided through a 4 river basin system that's maintained and operated by the City of Corpus Christi. The members here are shown for Region N. I wanted to just give them collectively a shout out for all of their time and effort and commitment to water planning. One of the key aspects of Region N, I wanted to have a quick sound bite before I hand it over to Lauren to talk about Region L, but I think supply diversification is key. I think the second thing that I would add to that is we need to be really thoughtful moving forward into the future in handling extremes, because I think that is kind of a trademark of what we're seeing now, meaning that during times of plenty, we need to be thinking about how do we protect our water supply during times of drought. So I think moving forward, Flood mitigation projects and water supply opportunities are intrinsically connected, and we're aware of that in Region N, and we look to strategies that can benefit both. So the evaluations that we're looking at right now for the 2026 plan include reuse projects, water conservation projects, looking at existing supplies and being able to manage those more effectively as far as run-of-the-river rights. We're also looking at fortifying and strengthening existing supplies through water treatment plant facility expansions, as well as replacement of aging infrastructure and fortification of those projects. Aquifer storage and recovery. City of Corpus Christi and the Texas Water Development Board have been looking at that as a strategy for the region, as well as desalination projects. We recently took a tour of the City of Alice's brackish groundwater desal plant that's going to be up and running by the end of the year. And Region N had developed that strategy collectively with the City of Alice as part of the last 3 regional plans. So it's really exciting to see this planning come into fruition with constructed projects. And then also part of the diversification aspect, as mentioned earlier, is looking at how do we, collectively look at how we're going to address droughts in the future. And the solution may be conjunctive use with groundwater supplies as well. So that's something that we're looking at in the plan, not only brackish groundwater desalination, but for those users that currently rely on groundwater supplies, looking at additional wells in order to fill in the gap. The 2 projects that have not only yield enhancement opportunities, but flood mitigation are a strategy to look at Nueces River diversion water over to Choke Canyon Reservoir, as well as removal of sediments from Lake Corpus Christi. So I will hand it over now to Lauren to talk a little bit about Region L.
Kristi. Thanks, Kristi. Quick show of hands. Who here serves on a regional water planning group? Okay. Who here has been to a regional water planning group meeting? Hey, that's great. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you for your service. So as Kristi mentioned, my name is Lauren Gonzalez. I work with Black & Veatch. We are the technical consultant for Region L, and we are privileged to have wonderful team members that support us with the development of this 1,800-page plan, including Laura Ron, public relations, and she's actually here in the back of the room today. Thank you, Laura. SWCA, Intera, and Hoff Power Consulting. So the Region L Regional Water Planning Group, or planning area, includes 21 counties. It's a very diverse region, both in terms of urban and rural areas, and also in terms of water sources. Lots of groundwater and surface water. It's almost a 50-50 split. And so we also include many different river basins, 9 different river basins, and the primary ones are the Guadalupe, San Antonio, and of course, the Nueces Basin. Within the Nueces Basin, we have 10 counties that are in Region L. We have, again, diverse water uses, 67 municipal water user groups, 9 major water providers, and just quickly about population in the Nueces Basin, we have anywhere between 167,000 and 192,000 people within Region L that are in the Nueces Basin. And the demands for the Nueces Basin are about 340,000 acre feet per year. The largest use type for Region L is irrigation. That's about 254,000 of the 340,000 total. And then the second largest use is mining, and then the third largest use is municipal. And this shows the 32 voting members and other non-voting members that are engaged with this process. Again, all of these individuals are completely voluntary. We thank all of them for their input, their guidance, their direction with all of this, and their service as well. So Region L does something a little bit different. Region L went a bit further than just having bylaws. They actually went forward with a 2021 plan enhancement process. And that process developed 11 guiding principles that basically support the policies in which the planning group will adhere to when it comes to decision making. And the core crux of all of that is, consensus-based decision making. And just quickly running through the conceptual schedule, this shows the conceptual schedule for all regional water planning regions over the 5-year planning cycle. And so, yes, so as you can see here, we're in Q2 of 2024, and one of the major things here is there are a lot of overlapping bars, which basically shows that we have a lot of different tasks that we're working on simultaneously, like developing the planning area description, still continuing to work on water supplies and availability, working on identifying water needs. And then, as Kristi mentioned, one of the major foci right now is development of water management strategies. And so those strategies are basically developed as a way to address needs or shortages for individual water user groups, for counties, for regions. And I'll talk a little bit more about water management strategies in a couple of different slides. Another thing that's worth noting here is that the public participation, Task 10, it spans the entire 5-year planning cycle. And that is because public input and feedback from entities, just like many people in this room, is fundamental, foundational to the regional water planning process. So we do so many outreach activities to try and get information from contact information, doing surveys to figure out what is your feedback on population projections? What is your feedback on water supplies? What projects do you have that you want to include in the plan? Another key component here is the deadlines. So the next major deadline that we have is the submittal of the initially prepared plan, which is due March 3rd, 2025. And then between the initially prepared plan and the final plan, due October 20th of 2025, is this public comment period. And that's very important for providing comments so that we can understand public opinion about particular portions of the plan, and then we can draft edits to that before we actually finalize the plan. However, the most meaningful way to shape the plan is by being engaged throughout the planning process with every step, every task that we're working on. That's the most meaningful way to contribute and shape the trajectory of the plan. And so going back to these water management strategies. So strategies can be added to the plan. Strategies are basically projects that would provide additional water during a repeat of the drought of record. And these strategies can be added into the plan by simply contacting Kristi or me or any other technical consultant that is leading the region, or even the political subdivision. They can put you in contact with the technical consultant to provide information to get your project into the plan. Those projects will then be evaluated uniformly, and then the Regional Water Planning Group will consider them for recommendation in the plan. So it is generally, these water management strategies are mainly to address needs within the region. However, they can also be recommended or included even if you don't have identified needs or shortages in your plan. And it also pays to have those strategies added to the plan because it makes many entities eligible for certain types of funding through the Texas Water Development Board. And Michele will touch on some of that later in this presentation. And so the next slide shows for Region N and Region L, the different activities and the deadlines associated with each in order to get your project information in to include it in the plan. And so for Region N, the deadline to add a new strategy is October 25th of this year. And so those are for additional strategies that are beyond those that were currently scoped within the scope of work that was approved in May, I believe, in May, at the May meeting. And so we have contact information over on the right-hand side for Kristi Shaw, if you're located within the Region N area. And then for Region L, our process is, our deadline is July 1st to submit information, initial project information to get a project added to the plan. One thing I've failed to mention is when I talk about strategies, what I'm talking about are projects that provide additional water, like a water treatment plant expansion, a pipeline expansion, a new well field, a desalination plant, a brackish desal plant. All of those different types of things are considered a water management strategy. And now I will hand it over to Michele to give a bit more information about resources and funding for regional water planning.
Thank you very much, Lauren. As you can see, it can be a very, very complicated, but it's a simple process. There are a lot of guidance documents and other resources that can help you either engage as part of the regional water planning participation process, or if you just want to learn a little bit more about the process before diving in. We have a lot of resources that are available on the Texas Water Development Board website that are designed both for the regional water planning groups themselves as well as the general public. And as you might imagine, both the Region L planning group and the Region N planning group have their own specific website that lists planning meetings. If you missed a meeting, you can take a look back at the agenda in the meeting minutes. In many cases, the meetings are recorded, so you can go back and listen to those if you're interested. Any of the documents that are prepared as part of the planning process, the technical memorandums, which are kind of the progress report that are done mid-planning cycle, the initially prepared plans, the final regional water plans from the previous cycle, those are all hosted on the region's individual websites for you to go have a look at if you're curious about a specific entity's current water management supply strategies that they have in the current regional water plan. That's a great place to go and look at and see what they have. And you can get those either from the Regional Water Planning Group's website or from the Water Development Board's website. Again, important milestones. The initially prepared plans are due to the board next March, and the final plans are due in October. And if you don't get a project into the plans for this planning cycle, well, there's always next cycle. But we'll talk a little bit about money and why it's important if you're contemplating a specific water management strategy, why it's important to participate sooner rather than later. Okay, show of hands. Who likes free money? That's not enough hands in here. Y'all think there's a catch? Who likes almost free money? Few more? Okay. Well, the Water Development Board is not just a planning and geographic information warehouse. About half of the Water Development Board's function is actually as a fiduciary clearinghouse. Or, if you'll pardon the phrase, we've got a bunch of extremely smart financial bookies on the payroll. A lot of the funding that the Water Development Board receives gets invested in bonds. The Water Development Board actually has a AAA bond rating on Wall Street. And we sell those bonds at a profit to be able to provide funding for most of the water supply projects, the public water supply projects that go on in the state of Texas. This slide will show that between January 1st of 2019 and December 31st of 2023, 5-year period, we disbursed over $7 billion in funding for projects. Now, we're all getting excited about Prop 6 and, the new water supply for Texas, $1 billion. That's a lot of money. But if you think about it, we're outlaying a lot of money to help people finance their projects. And we want you to come in and ask for funding. We've got quite a diverse array of funding programs available already. We have the SWIFT, the State Water Implementation Fund for Texas program. That's probably one of the most well-known in the municipal circles for funding larger supply projects. We have 2 water development funds that we affectionately call the D funds. We have drinking water and clean water state revolving funds. We have the lead service line replacement program. We have emerging contaminant program funds. For those of you that might be concerned about PFAS, yes, that's on our radar, and those projects are eligible for funding under the Emerging Contaminants Programs funds. Rural Water Assistance, Economically Distressed Areas Program, or EDAP. We have Agricultural Water Conservation Fund grants and loans, State Participation Program, Asset Management Programs for Small Systems, and Water Utilities Technical Assistance Program. Those are all currently available. They do vary with regards to application cycles. For example, SWIFT funding, typically abbreviated applications for SWIFT funding are submitted to the board for evaluation in January of each year, and the final applications are submitted to us in mid-May. That cycle just closed. Out of 25 applicants for SWIFT funding this year, 17 applicants will be moving forward with funding packages. So definitely check the website, reach out to our funding personnel. They will be certainly glad to set you up with a meeting to discuss funding options for your projects. Or you can also contact me and I will make sure that you get in touch with the right person for that. And then there's the New Water Supply for Texas Fund. That was born from legislative actions from Senate Bill 28. and Prop 6. The voters approved Prop 6. So that will give us a one-time $1 billion supplemental appropriation from the Texas General Revenue Fund. So the new water supply for Texas fund, by law, automatically gets $250 million of that. The rest of it will be distributed amongst other funds that we already have. And what it cannot fund, unfortunately, are EDAP, flood infrastructure funds, and agricultural water conservation funds at this time. But next January starts another legislative session. So there's time to make changes or have another go. The new water supply for Texas Fund, the Rural Water Assistant Fund, Clean Water State Revolving Fund, Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, those funds all allow for grants or principal forgiveness for loans. Most of our loans are in the 2 to 3% range, which for financing is a great deal. When you can combine that with principal forgiveness, or we have a lot of package requests that come in that are, say, for a $2 million loan and $4 million in principal forgiveness. So it can be very, very advantageous for entities to come in and say, we've got this project, we can't do this lift ourselves, how can you help us? The new water supply for Texas Fund projects, what the rules for the fund are still being established right now. We are in the process of evaluating public feedback from stakeholder meetings we held this spring and developing specific rules and guidelines to administer the fund. But the projects that are being given preference for the new water supply for Texas Fund are things like marine desalination, brackish groundwater desalination, produced water treatment, aquifer storage and recovery projects, and development of infrastructure to transport water that's made available by those other projects that I just mentioned. And public-private partnership projects are going to be eligible for funding. So keep that in mind. We've got more details to come later on this year about that. But as mentioned before, it does take a village, a county, a community, a watershed to make all this work. And for funding purposes, like for example, for SWIFT, the more people that you serve with your project, the higher your score is for your funding package. So think big term, think collaborative, and think multi-purpose. There are a number of potential combination flood control, do an off-channel reservoir, store up some flood water that would normally go out to the bay, and inject it into an aquifer, use it for municipal supply later. That concludes our presentation.
Travis, do you have any questions that have come in for us? If not, we've got a couple of kind of panel questions and thought we would have a bit of a roundtable discussion, but we've got about 15 minutes and I want to be sensitive to time.
Yes, I have quite a few questions that came in.
Oh, you do? Great. Okay, let's do those.
See, the most popular one so far is, can you explain the sediment removal plan for the Lake Corpus Christi?
Okay, I'll take that one if that's okay. So Lake Corpus Christi is in Live Oak County. And just this morning, we had a conversation with the General Land Office about a project that they're doing. They're taking a look at several reservoirs along the coast or just barely inland to see about the opportunities of using those sediments for coastal resiliency and to be able to transport that and have some flood mitigation benefits for the coastline. It's a really cool idea. They've asked several of the river authorities and interests that have reservoirs to participate in these conversations and have done kind of a small study right now to look at the feasibility for a few of the reservoirs. Lake Corpus Christi is included on that list. The Nueces River Authority earlier this year went out and collected some sediment samples, and the good news is that the types of sediment is coarse sand that's predominantly included in those tested results, and that is what the GLO wants. So that's very favorable. Still left to be seen is what those costs are going to look like, and that's going to be coming out later on this year or early next year. Kind of concurrent with that effort is that Region N has included on the list of water management strategies to evaluate sediment removal of Lake Corpus Christi. That was a strategy that was put in the 2001 plan. We found back then that it was just a really costly endeavor. I don't think that will change. Dredging is expensive, but I think that conditions have changed in which we want to be able to take a look at those opportunities. It is also included in the Region 13 plan as part of flood mitigation moving forward. So there might be some opportunities for some water supply and flood mitigation benefits there.
Okay, to partner on that question, could you have some of the advantages of projects that serve as multiple use in water supply enhancement and flood mitigation?
I'll start it and then I'll hand it over to Michele for that. I think that going back to the conversation earlier about ASR and different strategies, there is a real opportunity there. We recognize the importance of the in-stream flows for environmental purposes in the Nueces Delta and in other delta and kind of marshy environments. And we want to move forward, really keeping in mind the environmental sensitivities that rely on these pulses. And within that context, understanding where there might be water supply benefits. Thinking forward, we need to realize that the trends are also that there's reduced inflows through every successive drought that we've had since the 50s. So we need to be mindful of how can we store water for the future in these drought conditions and for future droughts that may be unprecedented. So I think that there's a real benefit there. The Water Development Board realizes that, and they are putting a lot of energy into looking at ways to encourage projects that serve both as flood mitigation and water supply.
Yes, just to echo what Kristi said, we definitely do need to be mindful of in-stream flows and some of the actions that are being taken, whether they are things like potable water reuse, direct and indirect reuse that may be affecting the in-stream flows back to the Nueces River and its tributaries. Flooding can be a huge concern. It's certainly a love-hate relationship. Yes, we need the water, but anybody that's lived in this area of South Texas knows that when it floods, it floods. So, finding that balance and being able to make use of the excess water when it's here and being able to mitigate impacts when we don't have it. Aquifer storage and recovery is a great way where you can store away excess floodwaters and save it for later while minimizing things like evaporation that certainly is a concern for surface water reservoirs. Evaporation steals so much water out of Choke Canyon, Lake Corpus Christi. Medina Lake is the perfect example of a project that people thought was going to be a good provider for water supplies, but between geography, hydrogeology, climatology, Medina Lake just has not worked the way it was designed. So we certainly need to be creative and be conscientious in the water supply strategies that we consider and implement moving forward.
What are the current region and regional water shortages?
I don't have that data off the top of my head. What I do know off the top of my head, though, is our current shortages for irrigation are in the Nueces Basin are around 150,000 acre feet. And one of the efforts that we have placed sort of a focus on for this cycle is to develop additional I guess it's an initiative to focus on outreach to rural communities. And so we, the Regional Water Planning Group, established a community or a rural and community outreach work group. And one of the things that we've been working on as part of this work group is developing water management strategies that would benefit rural communities. And so that could include municipal and non-municipal water conservation, rainwater harvesting, brush control, facilities expansion, recycled water, and so forth. And so right now, this summer, we have been meeting basically every month and to talk about these water management strategies, which ones we will actually incorporate, and then the methodologies used to estimate how much water could be generated or saved from each one of these. And so if you have an interest in attending one of these, we have them held at the San Antonio River Authority, and we have them online. You could participate virtually through a GoToMeeting link. And our next meeting should be held sometime in early July. We're looking at, I think, July 10th and July 11th. Kai Castillo is nodding yes. She's with San Antonio River Authority, and they're the political subdivision for Region L. So yeah, that's the needs that I know right now off the top of my head.
I'm speaking from Region N's perspective. The needs are between 30,000 and 50,000 acre feet moving forward into the future. The good news is that we have identified through the water management strategies collectively enough water in those projects in order to meet future needs. That's one of the key responsibilities of the planning group, and they take that position very seriously. Additionally, worth mentioning is that for the regional water planning groups, the task is to identify water strategies. The real work is then by the water providers that look to develop those projects along with the suite of other projects that they may be identifying throughout the process. And Region N's position is to be as nimble as possible with respect to projects that are included in the plan as to not provide any roadblocks for those water providers to meeting future needs. So even though we do identify future needs, which is reasonable, given the fact that if we had the infrastructure to meet the 2080 water needs, then everyone would be paying on projects that aren't realized right now. So there's a very delicate balance in making sure that those supplies are coming on in sufficient time before they're needed, but without too much of a lag time. So this is a really critical process by the planning group to continue to keep those plans up to date, which is why it happens on a 5-year basis, to be able to respond and identify projects in such a time that they can get them permitted and built in sufficient time to prevent any shortfalls.
All right. I got 2 more questions. Will rain harvesting projects be eligible for the new Texas Water Fund?
Great question. And I don't know yet. That is still being hammered out. So stay tuned this fall.
Can you discuss the population projection declines and the importance to water planning?
Okay. That's an interesting question. And it poses an interesting wrinkle in the water planning process. Normally, water supply planners are thinking population decline. Oh, good. I don't have to think either this far ahead for planning projects, or I don't have to plan as much. But data can often be inaccurate. Population shifts can be very, very short term. So it complicates things in how we take a look at assuming, is this population decline truly an actual population decline and not a glitch, particularly just coming out of COVID. A lot of people shuffled around, took advantage of, remote work situations, that type of thing. So we don't know if some of those population declines are permanent in an area or if it's a temporary dip. And it changes how we address some of those planning for the future supplies. Yeah, Kristi wants to add on to that a little bit.
This was a topic of significant discussion with respect to Region N. Because the projections are showing a decline in population and consequently a decline in certain sectors with respect to water demands. The way that we have addressed it is twofold. One, we got together with the experts and the water providers and stakeholders in Region N, and we kind of talked about that. We put together alternative projections that the Texas Water Development Board considered. They adopted a portion of them. They were also kind of attached to the process of looking at the Texas state demographers' data. So they had a little bit of flexibility, but then also was constrained to that method as well. So the way that we're addressing it in Region N is we're looking at identifying additional water strategies beyond the needs that we are seeing. And that gives us an extra layer of kind of prevention or redundancy, however you want to look at it, in the event that those projections are wrong we see a lot of growth. We see a lot of water demands in excess of what was adopted by the Texas Water Development Board, that we would be able to have a suite of projects to be able to tap into to meet those conditions. So the position is that there is quite likely going to be higher demands in the future because of what we know and industries that may be locating in this area or expanding, and or growth that we're going to be seeing associated with that, and more jobs and people moving into the area. So the Region N plan will be addressing that.
Similar to Region N, Region L had significant discussions about the population projections. I think even the Census Bureau acknowledged the difficulties with estimating census population numbers, and especially they acknowledged the undercount for Hispanic populations, which Nueces Basin has a significant population that are Hispanic. And so the way that we addressed that within Region L was the Region L Planning Group established a population and water demands work group that initiated an effort to reach out to all of these different water user groups, get their input, find out if there are alternative population projections. We submitted a request for alternative population and water demand projections, and the vast majority of those revision requests were actually approved by the board. And we haven't gotten to a point necessarily where we are over planning specifically to address those population declines. But that would obviously be up to each individual water provider to determine whether or not that's what they want to do to counteract that population decrease.